Good morning, everyone. So you just heard from Holly Best, one of the DCNR park managers. So what Holly does and what I do are kind of the opposite. We're both presenting from a practitioner's point of view, not so much a researcher's. But Holly works with a team of interns to remove invasive species. My job on the park, through the Ducks Unlimited grant, is to propagate native plant species that will be put back onto the park. And what I can say about the program here is that, one, no other state park in Pennsylvania does something exactly like this. So we're very fortunate to have funding that will allow us to do this, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit in my presentation. But also, I'm kind of keeping a lot of documentation in the hopes that other parks, and whether it be state or federal, feds probably have funding to do this, but we don't, state parks don't, but we're kind of like trying to give them guidelines as far as how to do it, because all you need is some equipment and people with know-how and some good volunteers. So I'm going to go through what I do throughout the entire year, some of the considerations that we've had to make when trying to do a large-scale restoration. Again, it's unique. We don't have a blueprint to follow, so we kind of had to do a lot of trial and error, at least on my part. And so we'll start with our presentation. So just like Holly had mentioned before, I feel like she gave half of my presentation. But anyway, what we looked at is the fact that we were treating invasives. Holly's team does an excellent job going out every single day in the summer to treat. We noticed that native plants, while their seeds are in the seed bank, they're not coming up really, really quickly, and we wanted to kind of keep the invasives at bay, but also promote the natives. And so we thought, why don't we grow natives and put them back in? That'll kind of speed things up. So what we decided to do is select some sites on the park that met specific criteria, and that's where we decided to do our restoration sites. We currently have three and a half kind of, and then we're looking to add a fourth this coming year, 2020. So first site is Thompson Circle. That's the photo that Holly showed. My picture still has Phragmites in it in the background. This is what it looks like after a year or two of treatment. It does not degrade very quickly in an area, so you're kind of left with little dead stalks, and then you have some live coming up, and I'll show you. That's like right here, and this is what Holly's interns can spot treat. We have Leah's Landing, which is kind of the show pony of our restoration area. That's where the observation platform called the Feather is. And that's an area that has very great diversity, but at one time that was all narrowleaf cattail and loosestrife, I believe, purple loosestrife. And then the head or the neck of the peninsula, which is right when you drive down onto the park on the bay side, that actually had an invasive tree species that was treated. That's a European black alder, so you'll see a lot of dead trees in that area, but there was no understory there. And with the high water levels, we kind of had a lot of flooding in that area on our multi-purpose trail, so we started a couple years ago to plant an understory. Some of it got washed away this year. We have started to fence it just to try to make it a little bit more stable. But our hopes are that we'll keep increasing the planting in this area, and it will start to rebuild a little bit of the understory that was there at one time before the invasive tree species moved in. So obviously I'm choosing native species. I work with a list called the Carnegie List, which is a historical documentation of what's been found on the park. There aren't a lot of plant surveys that have been done on our park, or at least large scale like Carnegie. Last one was probably 80s when Dr. Bissell did it. And so we have an on the park, for the park philosophy, and that means that we're not buying things at greenhouses and nurseries. We're propagating everything in-house. Some of the reasons that we would choose to do that is because I have a background in greenhouse work, and the plants that are brought in are from all over the country. They're not necessarily grown right here locally, and then they also can harbor diseases and pests that we might not have. So we decided that we would be purists and make everything here instead of bringing foreign plant material in. So and that's essentially what I do. Because I'm choosing the species, we decided also to look at pollinator plants. So you'll see, let's see, obedience plant, buttonbush, blue flag iris, this is a spirea, what is that, steeplebush, a red osier dogwood, swamp milkweed, and that's marsh skullcap. So anyway, we decided to bring species that were beneficial to pollinators in, since we decided to grow native plants. You know, there's a connection between native plant species and pollinators. There's a plant person that just came in who'll appreciate this. Hey Garrett, how's it going? So anyway, so we're really fortunate, like I said, to have funding to provide us specific equipment and structures for our growing. And we already had a greenhouse, a lean-to greenhouse and a plant lab here. It's in the Regional Science Consortium wing. So the greenhouse here is my propagation house. I also was able to put up a greenhouse on the park off of our maintenance road. And that's kind of our distribution center. So we make a couple thousand plants every year, and we need a place to store it. Obviously, it can't be stored up here. So this is what my lab looks like on a good day when I'm doing seed collection. We bring seeds in, we identify seeds, and then we process them and package them and keep them in cold stratification in a cooler here in our building. This is the greenhouse that is attached to this building. This picture probably was taken in April. We more than fill this up. We really could double the size of our facility and still not have enough room. So lots of plants going in there. And then this was Holly's intern team from a couple of years ago. They're actually the ones that built my greenhouse on the park. That's it. It just doesn't have its film on right now. And that's where we keep the plants that are going to be put into the park. We also have 8-foot deer fencing around part of it, and then a storage shed and things like that, irrigation system up there. So this is probably the best solution, but also the biggest challenge that I had is who's going to plant everything, because I'm just one person, I can't put everything in myself. So we actually take volunteers, which are usually students, scout groups, and things like that that come in. So our restoration sites had to be chosen with that in mind. So they had to be close to restrooms, we had to be able to get buses close by, and then we also had to transport all our tools, equipment, plants, and that kind of thing into these areas. So our restoration sites currently are kind of right off the main road. We can't go into the inner lagoons with all this stuff, at least not easily, and maybe not with volunteers. So this is what a planting looks like. This is at Leah's Landing. Again, that's an eco camp that's helping me plant that day. Let's see, and then monitoring. There's not always a lot of funding for monitoring, but we do go out and check our sites, check the health of our plants. I mark everything that I've planted, and we'll go out every couple of weeks and see if it's essentially still alive. We had some bad weather over, Thursday, Friday. It washed away a lot of things that we planted at Leo's. They're still there, they're still alive. They just got shifted a little bit. So I'm hoping that those things make it. And then this is Professor White with a student. He's giving a presentation, I think tomorrow. And so we're just doing some site monitoring. We also run transects in our restoration areas to look at submerged and emergent plants, and just look at the diversity that's there. Because when I'm doing a seed collection, I try to mark which locations I've gotten things from, and then we put that same species back into our restoration sites. So for example, last winter, I took elderberry cuttings, and this fall I planted them back within like 100 feet of the shrub that I cut from. So everything's very localized. We're trying to keep species that are found in certain restoration areas together, not kind of move things around too much, but also try to keep the diversity high. Oh, and Holly mentioned there's that hashtag winning thingy. So this is actually rare on the park now to see, wouldn't you say? Because there's not a lot of areas that look like this anymore, which means that Holly and her team are opening up more potential restoration sites for me to work in. So thank you. And so I'm going to show you what I do throughout the year. Everyone thinks that because I work with plants, I'm only busy in the spring and summer, but winter is actually one of my busiest times to do field work, and I'll show you why. So right now we're in fall. I just finished my seed collection. Like I said, everything is processed in the plant lab. Everything gets put to bed at the greenhouse site. And I get all my soil in, so I have all next year's soil on pallets up there. And we do some planting because school's back in session, so we get students that come out. This is Leo's Landing, again, in the fall. It looks okay, I don't know. Like I said, oh, I'm sorry, that was Thompson's. That was Thompson's. Leo's always looks perfect. Thompson's always looks a little messy. But anyway, fall again, trying to identify things, keep a record of where they're taken from, photograph some things because we have interns again that are coming in. They're not always familiar with the aquatic and wetland species, so just having a record of what we're taking and what we found. Winter, like I said, is very busy. We take hardwood cuttings. I'm not going to go into the science of what that is. It's super easy to make your own plants though. This is a bunch of hardwood cuttings that we take. The Pennsylvania DCNR environmental educators come out with me. They're great because I can say I want to cut buttonbush today and they know exactly where to find it. And what I do is sort those things into species, trim them down a little bit and keep them in pots outside. In the spring, if I've done everything properly, they will root in and we have more plants for things. So this is my list of species. And we do about 1,100 to 1,200 cuttings every winter. And I have an update on that for you. So I know you're hanging onto the edge of your seat right now. Anyway, this is our Thompson Circle again in the winter. I don't know why I have so many Thompson Circle pictures in here. We do a lot of education. The public is always very curious about what's going on with the facility on the maintenance road. So we try to incorporate that into some of our hikes and education programming. Again, DCNR educators with me there. So spring, everything gets seeded in the spring. I pull my trays out to start growing in March. So that means I'm tied to the greenhouse from March until June, every single day to make sure that it gets watered. But anyway, these are all native plant species. Most of you will probably recognize the milkweed, common milkweed. This is common milkweed seedlings. So, spring again. That's when I do my herbaceous cuttings. So we have our power clone down here. These are my obedient plant cuttings. They look really nice in that picture. And then this is the hardwood cuttings that we take in the winter. They start leafing out. And this is a good example of the volunteers that I get for this program. So again, we cannot go into remote areas. I haven't lost a kid yet. So anyway, and then this is my species list for what we seed. We're always trying to increase the number of species, of course, so we do about 3,300 seeds every spring. And summer, as you can imagine, it's very hectic. We're dealing with visitors, but we're also caring for plants and putting a bulk of our plant material into the park. At that time, we have a lot of camps that come out, summer schools. I work with Holly's interns. And here's kind of a wrap up, because I think I'm going over. Anyhow, we did about 4,000 plants, just shy of 4. And these are actually my hardwood cuttings. That's what they look like close up. Our acreage is just over 13. And I'm gonna just go quickly over our areas. This is Leah's Landing. So to orient yourself, this is where that feather is, the observation deck. Let's see here. This is the neck or the head of the peninsula. So that's Bayside. If you look over here, here's a break wall and the beaches. So that'll kind of orient you there. And then Thompson Circle is this brown muddy mess. It's actually kind of pretty when you're in there, and it's adjacent to Presque or Thompson's Bay, which is right here. So, and then again, like I said, I'm a practitioner, so dealing with growing facilities and infrastructure is probably the most critical for my part of the project. If I did not have the greenhouse, the plant lab, and the other greenhouse, there's no way I could do my job here. But also, you know, keeping in mind that a lot of these plants that I'm trying to grow, there's not a lot of great growing instructions on them. They're not things that you find in greenhouses and nurseries, nor would you want to, because probably the conditions in your backyard are not right unless you live in a swamp. But good resource management team. And I'm gonna say thank you to Holly because, you know, if you're working on a state park or property that's not your own, you need to keep lines of communication open and let everyone know what you're doing, I guess. So, and then again, our staff, interns, and volunteers. I couldn't do this project by myself, so I rely very heavily on, especially volunteers and our consortium team. So, of course, I'd like to add more sites. Definitely, we're already addressing the regrowth in areas of invasives, so we do spot treat there. And then increasing our species, of course, that's a no-brainer. And then plant 100%. My goal has always been to plant 100% of what I grow every year. We have not reached that yet, but we're still trying. So, okay, here's the exciting part. Update for this year, which is a phase 3 of this project. We needed to increase our growing site by 60% because I'm able to produce an awful lot more plants than the first phase I was involved in. We've more than doubled the amount of hardwood cuttings that we do, so we went up to just over 3,000. And number of seeds that we planted were a little over 5,000. And I'm gonna say, can anybody guess what 1935 is? And that's not the year I was born. I'll just answer it because nobody knows. 1935 is the amount of plants we put in the ground this year. So we are on track to double the amount of plants installed in this phase as opposed to last phase. So kind of proud about that. Thanks to all the same people Holly thanked. And then, do you have any questions for me specifically?